I think one of the most interesting things to do with LinkedIn is to not talk about what is it that you see, but what you think your audience would need.
For anyone that doesn't know about your work or what it is you do, could you just tell us a little bit about your background, how it is you got to where you are today, and the kind of people that you're helping right now?
Sure. My purpose is to help leaders thrive with disruption. And so these are leaders typically of organizations. I work with a lot of very large organizations, Global 100 companies, but I also work with leaders from all walks of life. So sometimes they're in academia or nonprofits, startups. So my reach in talking to leaders about creating a strategy, creating a culture is all around how do you thrive with change and disruption. And I got here through a circuitous route. I came out of Harvard Business School, went into newspapers, and then went into being an analyst, I thought, for just 2 years. And then I'm now 21 years into being a researcher and analyst. And along the way, I started writing books. And so I can write books, I can do like little short tweets too as well. But it's all in the service of connecting with my audience, again, leaders who are trying to thrive with disruption.
Perfect. And just on that journey, I noticed just from your LinkedIn profile and when we were researching your background ahead of the interview, I noticed that you started Ultimature in 2008. And when you did that, you left what a lot of people would probably consider to be a fairly safe and well prospected career as a principal analyst at Forrester. 2008, I guess in hindsight, we know now, but 2008 was also the start of a global financial crisis. Can you tell us a little bit about your mindset at the time and why you made that decision to move from such a good job to then create something new, and also a little bit about how you managed to stay resilient in such a very, very difficult economic moment?
Sure. Frankly, I got very lucky. In 2008, in the spring, I published my first book called Groundswell, about how companies can use social media. And after working on that book and writing that book, I wanted to expand the things I was working on. And being an analyst at Forrester, you really need to focus on one particular area. In my area, it was interactive media and marketing. And I felt there were leadership and culture that I wanted to explore too as well, but it didn't fit into the job description anymore. So after almost 10 years at being at Forrester, being incredibly happy there, so happy with the culture and the people and the work that I was doing. And the reason I kept growing and staying there is because I could shift my coverage areas, but I couldn't do what I wanted to do within the constraints of what Forrester needed me to. So I decided it was time to leave and start my own thing, do my own thing. Timing just happened to be right before the financial crisis hit. And I was incredibly lucky to secure 3 great clients right before everything crashed. So during that time, I decided to write my next book and start growing a company. And again, very luckily, people in the middle of a financial crisis cut all of their marketing budgets. So they wanted to know, how do I market with this new thing called social media? And we were literally the only game in town. I had a book around this, a best-selling book. My team members were all really good at doing this, my other partners. So we were growing like gangbusters in 2009 and 2010. So again, it was a matter of what we were looking at, all these new disruptive things, and people really wanted to understand how to use them because of all the disruption that was going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting paradox that, in times of struggle, that people would then sort of look to something else, and like social media, and I guess with a much reduced budget. Was that a constraint for people at the time, or was it more that they just refocused an existing budget into social media, and that was kind of, like you say, you got lucky?
They were absolutely cutting their budgets. And so they were looking at social media. At that time, it wasn't there were very few paid opportunities. So it was all organic. And the biggest thing they struggled with is, so if I put something out there, I can't actually control what people say back to me. They could be saying negative things about me on my own channel. Is that okay? And we're used to that today. But back in 2009, 2010, that was completely antithesis to anything you were marketing. Why would you open yourself up to criticism? Why would you take that risk and go out there and actually have a conversation with people when you don't know what would come out of it? So that was a completely different world. And looking back on it, it feels kind of quaint. Like, remember those times when we thought we could control the message? And you know much better now. And it's a very different world today. But back then, people really needed a lot of handholding to say, like, how do I even engage with people? How do I even think about how my employees use social media? So they needed a lot of training and research and writing to help them just even understand it.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite an interesting point that that I hadn't considered, that people would have been quite sort of hesitant to put something out there that could be criticized, where other people had a voice. How did you convince, people at sort of very senior positions, or people that needed to convince the right people? How did you manage to sort of hold their hand, as you say, and get them over the line and say, okay, yeah, this is the future, this is a good thing?
Well, I would just show them. I pull up a browser and show them this conversation is happening with or without you. So the only choice you have is, do you want to engage in that conversation or not? Because it's happening. So they're talking about you. They're saying good things, nasty things. It's all happening. And so the only choice you have is, are you going to be a part of that conversation? And because you're a part of it, you have a potential to steer it and to inform people, like, this is what's really happening. Create more transparency about what's happening inside your organization. Again, a very different time, and leadership has really changed, I think, for the better, where people understand they're not in control. My second book was called Open Leadership, because this whole idea of being open, being transparent, about being authentic felt so dangerous to people. I remember one CEO coming up to me like, I know, I get it. I need to be authentic, need to be human, share more, but how open do I need to be? And that's a really darn good question. Because in the past, if you were told to just be completely closed, keep everything secret, and now you're told to throw the doors open, how open should they be? How much can I risk putting out there before I get in trouble?
Yeah, it's a balance. I mean, I know for me personally, it's something that I do think about sometimes before I post something. It's like, am I going to regret this in a year or in 6 months' time? Or, how is this going to be viewed from the future? I mean, obviously we don't know, but yeah, it is an interesting dilemma that I think all of us deal with social media. You mentioned your books there. I mean, I know you've authored 6 books, I think I'm right in saying today, covering topics like leadership, disruption, and succeeding in business. If you were to point sort of a first-time leader or first-time entrepreneur to one and say, okay, start here, where would you direct them?
I do like this little book that I wrote back in 2015 called The Engaged Leader. And that's just a simple manual that says, if you want to be an engaged, transformative leader, then you have to be able to listen at scale. You need to be able to share in order to connect. And then also you have to engage, truly engage in the conversation in order to transform. So these 3 skills of listening, sharing, and engaging are all about how you think about your leadership, and you do these activities in order to achieve your goals as a leader. And it was partly written around the whole digital space and social space, but I think overall it lays down this whole question of what kind of relationship do you want with the people you're leading? So if you think about leadership as a relationship, then you think about it very differently. It's not your position, it's not your title, it's not the power that you have. It is this relationship that you have, and what kind of relationship do you want? And so that is the core of the work that I do. It keeps coming back to relationships. And yeah, I can talk about the technologies as much as you want, all the cool, great technologies that are out there, but in the end, they don't matter if you don't know what kind of relationships you want to create with those technologies. So that book, The Engaged Leader, is actually quite foundational. But I also like my latest book, The Disruption Mindset, because it lays out how do you actually change and transform your organization. And as a first-time leader, thinking very strategically, how do I lead? How do I lead change? Because that's what you do as a leader. You create change. And if you're not creating change, then it's not that you're not a leader, and that's okay. You're a manager, right? Because you're creating and managing status quo. But if you're a leader, and very importantly, if you're starting a company, if you have, and even more so, if you're a leader in your mindset, but not necessarily in title, then you need to be thinking about how you're going to create that change and systematically seeing that future, investing in your leadership, and then creating the culture that can create that change.
I love that. That's a great answer. And we'll link to those books as well, by the way. You mentioned digital transformation and tech and that kind of thing. And, you know, it's such a fast moving space, especially in leadership and in these different tools that you have to try and engage people. Like, how is it that you keep up to speed with everything? Because it almost seems overwhelming that there's so many new things right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of technology that's out there, but a lot of it is variations on a theme. So when you think about all the collaboration technologies, they are there to be able to connect and integrate all of these different legacy platforms inside a company. Think about customer engagement tools that are out there. They're all about creating new ways to connect with customers. And I keep going back to, especially when it comes to digital transformation, what in the end is your core objective? What is the purpose of this transformation? Is it to put in place new technologies, or is it to enable you to do something differently with your business? So the way that I advise leaders is to focus on that objective. And when somebody has a new technology that comes along, when somebody brings like, hey, I think we should look at this new bright, shiny object, don't try to understand what that technology does. Because the key thing is you want to know, how does that technology help us achieve our objectives of this transformation to allow us to do X, Y, or Z? Because when you keep focusing on that, then the scope of technologies that are actually relevant shrinks by a huge number to just the ones that are actually going to move you forward. And those are the places where you need to dive down deep into those technologies. But, you know, looking at quantum computing, for example, favorite new technologies, not relevant today, not relevant at all, and for the majority of companies. But for a small number of companies, it is actually very, very important for them to understand, because it could break crypto security, things that we have, which is why we see banks and financial institutions really investing in right now. But for the rest of us, we don't need to worry about it. Don't need to think about it. It's an interesting curiosity here on this side, but we don't need to focus on that.
Yeah, so it's like, I guess as long as you're working on that core principle of what is it we're trying to achieve, and then you marry the technology to that, or you marry whatever it is that you've heard about this app or whatever system, SaaS system you might want to use. It really is a case of like sticking to the core principle of where it is you want to go, and then finding the technology to go with it.
Yeah, I get often asked to come in and talk about the newest technologies, what the future looks like, and I'm like, I'm happy to do that if you want to, but I don't think it's going to help you. It may actually be a waste of time. What I'd rather do is come in and spend that time talking about who you think your future customers are, because unless you're super clear about who your customers are going to be in the future, and you're aligning that, and you're creating a strategy against this, aligned view of who those customers are, then you're sort of just scattering around in all these different directions, wandering in the desert, looking and hoping that you find the treasure someplace. And a strategy is all about where you are today and where you're going to go in the future. How are you going to get there? And if you're not completely clear and aligned on what that future is that you're building together, it's not going to work. So I do this very simple exercise. I go around a company, I'll walk around or talk to the executives and go, who do you think your future customer is? And very rarely is everybody aligned. Each department has a different way of looking at the customer. Everybody, again, there's just no alignment and clarity on where we're trying to go. So if you don't know where you're trying to go, who you're trying to serve, then all the technology in the world is not going to make any difference in the world.
And when you go to a company and you see that sort of siloed mentality almost about in relation to their future customer, how do you bring them together? You know, how do you get them onto that one page to then say, okay, this is the person or persons we're going to target in the future?
Right. One of the things is just simply having the discussion. Bring your existing personas, your segmentations of all these customers, put them in the table. Have you ever shared them with each other? In most cases, they haven't. So what are the common points here? How do we develop a unified view of who that customer is? And maybe we just say, start from scratch, because this is built on old knowledge and we haven't frankly even updated in 2 years. So maybe we start from scratch and we do some deep research, we do some interviews, or we just even do some brainstorming. What are the needs and wants of this new customer in the future? What are the things that are changing that determines these customers are coming up? And if they even don't feel comfortable doing that, they're like, we're not comfortable looking out 3 years or 5 years. We'll look just to what I call the adjacent customers, people who are not in the core, but just outside of it. And this is probably the easiest way to go do it. It's like, who are your adjacent customers who aren't exactly the right fit for what you call product market fit? But if you change certain things about the way you did, they would be your core customers. So what is it that they need? How are you falling short? Even take a look at your crankiest, most complaining customers, because you don't really serve them as well as they need to be. What would you have to change in order to serve them better? Are they worth serving? So having these more strategic questions around your customers, either far out or near closer in, are really good discussions to have. Because otherwise, guess what we do? We focus on those beautiful, profitable customers right at the center of our bullseye. And we love serving them because they love us, we love them, they're highly profitable, where everything is geared towards them. Great, except that we know things change and the center of the market will probably shift away from those core customers. They're probably even shifting. So unless we know where they're shifting, where those new markets are going to be, we won't be ready for them unless we start making those plans today.
It's so interesting, just that thought process that goes on behind. I guess you work with some of the biggest companies on earth, and it's very interesting because as a consumer, you just expect it's all worked out and they already have things mapped out. But they need people like you to refocus them, right? Like it's so interesting that's a thing. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, just on the topic of disruption and the different industries that you serve, from where you sit, is there a particular industry that sort of excites you, or where you think, that's about to blow up? Where should people be looking now to sort of think, well, that industry is ripe for disruption, or is very open to it but doesn't know how to start?
I look at every single industry and there is disruption happening. People will come to me like, oh, my industry is being so disrupted. And that's great, and they see all this change happening. And what's fascinating is people saw a lot of change happening over the past 2 years. Our research shows that they think even more disruption is going to happen over the next 2 years. Because what has happened is we've gotten used to doing this change. We've gotten so much more comfortable and confident that we can manage massive amounts of change. I mean, we did in 5 or 10 days what we thought would have taken 5 or 10 years. And we did it literally overnight. And you're thinking, well, if I could do that, let's push through this other sets of changes. We can tolerate and handle a lot more than we ever thought we could. So what I see is less whole industries that are changing as much as there are pockets in every single industry where people are doing highly disruptive things. I'll give an example. I was speaking to an executive, this is a few years ago, and he goes, oh my goodness, my industry is being so disrupted, it's unbelievable. I go, you're in the sand manufacturing business. I mean, they make sand, right? And it goes to 5 distributors of that sand. And he goes, but you have to understand, my customers, all these people who make out of our sand, and in particular, glass manufacturers. Glass is one of the most innovative space because it goes into products like our phones. It goes into all the displays. It goes into cars, and it's constantly changing. And he goes, we have to now be so attuned to what the end users are trying to make, to connect with all these material scientists from all around the world so that we stay on top of sand development. So when I see the sand manufacturers saying we're being disrupted, highly disrupted, I don't think any industry is safe. I don't think any industry can sit back and say, oh, that's not going to us. So every industry is facing a huge amount of change right now.
Is there anyone that sort of lights you up and you're maybe either involved or not involved, but sort of thinking, I'm really excited to see how this develops?
Yeah, I'm very fascinated to see how the whole financial services industry is going to develop, because there's so much change happening there, especially with fintech happening. You have cryptocurrencies coming on board, just challenging the whole foundations of money, right? These are fundamental issues that ask the question: what is wealth? What is money? What is a financial institution? What's the definition of that? So that industry, I think, is and it's very public. It's very visible for all of us to watch and see. We're like, well, that's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I think I'm sure a lot of people watching this are going to share that view, definitely. Just talking a little bit more about sort of leadership and what you see in the world. In terms of sort of the leaders of today and the leaders of the future that you sort of come across, what sort of differences in attitudes or differences in sort of working styles or wants and needs do you see between that group of people and perhaps people that you may have worked under in the past as your direct reports or as your boss or whatever?
Yeah, there has been a traditional characteristic of and definition of what a leader is, who that leader is, looks like, does. And it tends to be very authoritarian, command and control. You sit in the corner office, you're directing people left and right, go do this and that, and you sit back and it just happens, right? So very much in command. You lay things down, your word is the law, and people go and do it. And the hierarchy just flows all the way down, information flows up, you have perfect information, you can make these decisions wisely. And the reality is that that type of leadership just doesn't exist. I mean, very few leaders and CEOs will say they have a full picture. In fact, they say the biggest challenge is really understanding what the truth is. What's the reality out there? And really wondering, are my lieutenants right below me telling me the truth? Or are they hedging things so that they look better than everyone else? I mean, what's really going on there? And even more importantly, what leaders are saying is, I love being able to connect all the way down into the front lines of people, to really get into and talk with people in a way I could never do before. I can truly listen to them. And I love breaking down the power distance. So I feel connected to them and they also feel connected to me. As you can imagine, that causes huge amounts of turmoil inside of organizations, because anywhere in the middle, you're being cut out. You're saying, like, what's my role if my top leader can talk to my front lines, and what's my job and my role? So the new model of leadership, I think, is much more Gary Bowles, who wrote this beautiful book called The Next Rules of Work. He says that you're going from the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. So you see yourself as a guide, where instead of directing people, you're allowing all of that knowledge and expertise that resides in people. You're developing their agency. You're really encouraging them to step up and determine what's the work that needs to be done, because you're the closest to the work. You decide that. And I'll be here to guide you, but we're going to be clear about what the objectives are. We've got the right people on the team. Now go do it. You don't need me to tell you what to do. And I keep coming back to this relationship. When you, as a leader, think about not command and control and this hierarchy of things, but you think of leadership as a relationship, it shifts everything that you do. And it acknowledges the fact that employees, especially after the pandemic, want to be known and seen for their whole selves. This is not about me just coming to work and checking everything at the door. It means that when I come into a meeting and we're going around like, okay, everybody here, how are we doing today? Let's clear. And someone can honestly say, you know, I'm distracted today. I'm here and I will get undistracted, but I just, so you know, I have something going on that my mind is someplace else, but I will be here. But it's just good to know, where are you at? And to be honest about that, not hold it against you. And when you have that kind of relationship, I think that's the kind of relationship we truly all want. We don't really want to tell us what to do. We want to be full partners with them and equal. respected, listened to, known. These are incredibly powerful feelings that I think leaders should be aspiring to create in that relationship with their followers.
Definitely. And I love that quote about the sage on the stage and the guide at the side. It's beautiful. It couldn't sum up more what I would want personally, and I think what pretty much everybody wants, right? No one wants to just be treated as a compartmentalized box. You want to be seen as a human. I really like that. I mean, just talking about your personal leadership. I mean, you've built a huge following on LinkedIn. I guess through wonderful posts and brilliant advice. But I might be answering the question for you. How did you do it? How did you build that following? And what sort of tips can you give to people that are perhaps looking to build their own following, or that of their business, or maybe they've got a community that they're struggling to engage? Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
And I got very lucky. An analyst covering social media on social media. And so was able to get onto the LinkedIn influencer program. And that just really helped build my audience very, very quickly early on. I think one of the most interesting things to do with LinkedIn is to not talk about what is it that you see, but what you think your audience would need. How would you help your audience? And it's always everything from your profile to the content. It has to be geared to your audience and what they need to hear in order to do whatever it is that they're doing better. So having a really clear idea of who your audience is and what their needs are is essential. So I have a persona that I write to. Her name is Valerie. She's a senior leader at a financial institution. She is a woman of color, the parent of 2 young kids. She is very active in her life, in her community, and at work. She's frustrated because she wants to create change in her organizations as much as she's doing change in her personal life. But her leaders and managers just have things locked down. She has some inklings of ideas how she can move it forward, but she needs some inspiration. She needs some support. She needs to know that other people are in the same situation, because it just feels so lonely being there. So I have this fully fleshed out. I can see, and I write to Valerie every single time. I think about her and what words would inspire her, what content would help her along on her journey. And I think that's what is the best thing that you can do. It's not about what you find interesting. It's about what content would help the people you are trying to serve. And having that focus constantly is a key part. So I never write anything. I never post anything to make myself look better. Every single time, and my entire team is focused on Valerie. You can ask them, they know her profile too. They can tell you explicitly who this customer is, who this person is. We're all writing for her.
That's amazing. My mind has just been blown, because it's such simple advice, but it is perfect. And it goes right back to what you said about when you're consulting with companies. They are looking for their future customer, and you are looking at right now, what does Valerie need? I think that's absolutely brilliant advice. I mean, just moving on to the topic of advice, would you say that there's been a particular piece that's resonated with you, or can you remember a particular mentor or anybody in the past that's given you any advice that's really you've carried with you on your journey?
Yes. I was at Harvard Business School in my second semester, having no clue what I wanted to do with my life, because my original plans got all blown up. So I'm sitting there going like, what am I going to do? And one of the best pieces, this is like the best nugget of advice I learned in my entire business school career. And that is, your career is going to be the most important asset you will ever manage. Your career. So manage it as if it's the most important asset. And think about where you want to be 18 months from now. So not 3 years, 5 years, but 18 months from now, because that's long enough that you can start taking some actions today to say, well, where do I want to be able to do, be with, the kind of job and environment I want to be in. I can start making those changes today. And that has been great advice, because I constantly look 18 months out, and I have regular times when I sit back and do assessments about where I am. And I'm actively managing my career to say, am I happy here? Am I doing what I want to be? Am I in a good position to be where I want to be 18 months? What do I have to make now? And constantly doing that throughout my career. I mean, I tend to stay at companies for very long times. I mean, I was at Forrester for 10 years. I was at Ultimature, I'm still there. So there's something about this 18-month profile allows me to stay motivated and engaged and fulfilled, because I'm not wondering what else is out there. I'm actively looking and saying, am I interested in what's going on? So when I have team members who have been working with me for 18, 24 months, I encourage them to go out and look, to go out and do informational interviews, to itch that, to scratch that itch and say, what else is out there? And sometimes they go, yeah, I think this is a better fit for me. I'm like 100% supportive. I'm going to help you find your new job. But more often than not, they come running back and like, I looked at that. That's not nearly as good as what I have here. And they're just even happier, more engaged. And I can say this from my own experience, that when I went out and looked, it made me realize, man, I have a great job. I really like what I do. 80% of the time I get to do exactly what I want. And that's a great job when only a small amount of your time is dealt with, like, paperwork, administrative things, trainings, the things that you have to do. You just have to do them no matter what you're doing. Even as an entrepreneur, there's even more of that. It's not the best thing to do. And I realized also that being the head of a company, you think that you have all the freedom in the world to be the CEO. Actually, it's the least freedom that you have. When you're a CEO, you are at the beck and call of everybody in your organization because you want everyone to succeed. So whatever is thrown onto your plate, it's really hard to push it aside because you have to be able to deal with it because the buck stops with you. So I talk to a lot of people, especially for some entrepreneurs, that why do you want to start a company? They go, I want to be controlled. I want to be in charge. I'm like, that's not a good reason. I can guarantee you that is not a good reason to start a company, because you'll quickly find out you're actually not in command. You're not in control.
I love that. And especially when you mentioned about just the openness with employees, like, yeah, go and see what's out there. Especially now, during this, we're in the midst of the so-called Great Resignation. I felt like I could hear employers around the world applauding what you were saying there, to say, yeah, go and have a look. If there's, maybe it's better, maybe it's not, but we'll still be here. Sorry.
Let's just go back on that. Just one quick thing, saying that we will talk about your last day of work on your first day of work, and it was an acknowledgement that you're probably not going to work here forever, because we're a small company, or even if you're a big company, we may not be able to serve you, to be able to tap into your strengths, and as you learn and grow, to keep you engaged. So this is the deal. Okay, we're going to have this relationship of integrity. We're not going to have you slink off at lunch to go interview with company when you're actually doing that. Instead, let's have an honest conversation to say that as the time comes where you or us are seeing that your skills have expanded beyond your role, then we have a conversation. Can we fill that? And if we can't, then I'm going to open all of my resources to be able to help you find your next position that can tap into your strengths and continue your journey. And in return, I ask you to give us plenty of time to hire your replacement and that you train them. Because the most devastating thing to leadership is to have somebody give you a 2-week notice. It's like, what? I thought we had a good thing going. You didn't like this? You weren't happy? You're leaving me? And it leaves you in such a lurch. And so, like, why do we do this to ourselves? Why? Because that's the way it's always been done. Isn't it healthier? Isn't it better for the organization, for everybody, if we're much more honest about this, if we're much more fair about how we treat people, and treat them like living, breathing humans who have a life and a career ahead of them? Because regardless of whether they're working with me or at another company, we are connected for the rest of our lives. We'll always have on your LinkedIn profile this position, this time that we spent together. So let's make it the best possible. And when it's time to move on, I give you all my blessings. I give you all the resources I can make available to you, because we are connected. This relationship will continue on after this position.
I love it. Yeah.
People don't think this way. People don't talk about things this way. And it's antithesis. But I think by looking at, again, relationships, like really saying, what kind of relationship do we want? Actually become better leaders.
Why is it you think people don't talk like that? Because it is almost like a relationship, right? I know you said you use that word a lot, but it actually feels like a personal relationship. Why is it that people don't talk like that? Why haven't we got to that stage before now?
Because we've been trained by HR, we can't do that. You have to have a separation. We've been trained that when we come to work, we don't talk about these things. And, you know, if you actually admit that you're not happy in your job, you could lose your job, right? And if you say that something is potentially wrong with something, if you give feedback to your employee, like, hey, I see you're not as focused on things, the employee's going to be like, oh my gosh, is my job at stake? Am I going to be laid off? I'm going to be put on a performance improvement plan. Versus saying constantly, not once a year or even once a quarter, but constantly, hey, I've given you feedback. How's it going? You're giving me feedback. What's challenging you or not? And this is constant dialogue. So we know exactly where we stand with each other. We're clear. Everything that has to be said has been said. There's no misunderstandings. There's no blind sides. There's no sense that I don't know what's going on in your head and you don't know what's going on in my heart. It's all out there. And because it's all clear, we can just get down to work. Mm-hmm. But this whole idea that you actually be honest and tell the truth, for whatever reason, we've had it beaten out of us that that's dangerous. That's not something you do as a leader because it's risky. And I would counter that by saying, oh my goodness, it's so much more risky if you don't tell the truth. Because what people really want from our leaders, they just want two things. They want honesty and they want fairness. That's what they want. If it's bad news on the horizon, tell me, please tell me, trust me enough that I'm a grown-up enough that I can deal with the bad news. And maybe we can all put together and avert that pending disaster. But if you don't tell me, how can I help? How can I turn things around? I'm just kind of going forward clueless until something hits and we all lose our jobs. We even lose the company. Yeah. That doesn't help any.
Yeah, and a lot of that is wrapped around trust. I mean, you mentioned that it's so important. You mentioned something else that I just want to touch on. You said about how you're constantly looking 18 months in advance to make sure that you're heading down the right path and your career is being managed in the way that it deserves and it's being honored. Do you ever find yourself frustrated in the moment that things aren't happening as fast as they should or in exactly the way that they should?
Yeah, constantly. And I'm one of these people who my biggest strength is being a maximizer. So I'm always trying to get the most out of every situation, every asset, every person, every relationship. Like, let's go to the max. Let's go to the very edges of what we can do. And it frustrates me when I have to pull back from that because of resources, of time, capabilities. I'm like, well, we could just do so much more. Why can't we do more? And so this is about this whole idea of just surrendering to the current circumstances. I could get really stressed about that. I could get upset about that. Or I could be at peace with it to say, this is the best that we could do. This is the best that circumstances provided to us, and be okay with that. So my frustration with things is less so because of the acceptance of the way that things are. I'll do the best that I can do. And that's all I can ask for. I can't ask for perfection because that doesn't exist. All I can ask for is excellence in the work that we do. And that being present and being excellent is all that we can expect of ourselves. The results, the outcomes, completely out of our control. And when I accept that, it makes my life so much better, so much easier.
Yeah, I think when we have that constant benchmark or yardstick that we're trying to measure ourselves against, that doesn't exist for anybody else, it's our own personal thing, we suddenly make our lives much more difficult, right? So I just wanted to, last couple of questions, that touch on like your sort of day-to-day. Is there a book or a podcast that you're reading or listening to at the minute, or that you can't live without right now on perhaps on your commute or when you're at the gym?
I listen to the same boring news podcast most of the time, but I'm going to pull up this one that I really do like a lot, and I always forget the name of it because this is on my playlist. And it's called Fearless. It's called Fearless by Charles Day, The Art of Creative Leadership. And it's just a wonderful, inspiring leadership podcast that I listen to. because he goes and interviews people about how they are being fearless in their leadership and talks about moments when they were fearful and how they overcame them. And just like really thoughtful, interesting ways to be thinking about leadership. So I really do enjoy that one. So Fearless with Charles Day, D-A-Y.
I mean, just on your own personal fearlessness, I guess, it's got you to this point, but have you had any particular challenges or any moments where you thought, I'm not sure how this is going to work out as you've been going along in your career today?
Yeah, I remember a moment when I was leading Ultimature and I had taken the eye off the ball. I really didn't see a pending disaster coming with cash flow. So I was focusing on the book. And I realized that we were hiring people, but weren't bringing in and closing in enough deals to be able to manage that. And suddenly I realized in 2 weeks, we're going to be out of cash. So I had to make some really drastic decisions, let a bunch of people go who I just literally had just hired. And I'm like, what did I do? And then I realized for 2 months, I just wasn't watching the cash, and cash is king. So, I really regretted that. It was something completely avoidable, something I could have anticipated, did not manage it, didn't put the controls in place to be able to say, hey, this is what's going on, until it was too late. So one of the lessons that came from that was really staying much more on top of things, having good dashboards, having that discipline, and around just the operations of a business, but also having that particular sense of really what's going on and never being able to take my eye off of that. I can put it on autopilot a little bit, but having sort of like alarms and things go off to make sure that I'm on track, some key indicators was a really good learning from that.
Okay, so that's looking back, and obviously you bounced back spectacularly from that moment of strife. What's next? What is the next 18 months, I guess, hold for you, and how can people follow that 18 months of journey as well?
Yeah, I think I just launched a podcast this week, so lots of new content. Say thank you. Like, oh my goodness, talk about being out of my comfort zone. I'm having a really good time with that, but it means I'm constantly producing episodes. I'm launching a course to help leaders be better change agents and better disruptive leaders. So that will be debuting over the next few months, and then actually the course will launch in February. And so I'm just finding different ways to engage with leaders, finding different ways to connect with them. And that's what I see laying out over the next few months, is new ways to do research, new topics that I'm curious about, and continue to find different types of modalities like podcasts and courses. And I love doing my live streams to be able to connect with people. So just trying lots of new things. Probably won't go on TikTok anytime soon because my audience really isn't there. And but it's awfully fun, right? But we'll see. In 2 months, I will actually be doing some TikTok or Instagram videos and shorts. So people can follow me at my website, charlenelee.com. And then also a place where I'm very active is LinkedIn. So you can go to LinkedIn, and my name is right there, Charlene Lee. That's probably my most active channel.
Fantastic. And we'll put links to both of those on here as well. And if you've got a link to the podcast, we'll have to do that too. Brilliant.
Yeah, the podcast is called The New Rules of Disruption. And you can find it anywhere.
Brilliant. Okay. Wonderful. Well, I think that's all the questions that we've had, and I feel like I've wrung as much knowledge as possible out of you. It's been such a good conversation. Thank you so much, Charlene.
Great. You're so welcome. All right. Thank you so much.